There is a sound that stays with you forever once you have heard it. Not a loud sound, not a crash or an explosion. It is the sound of a room going quiet in the wrong way. One moment, there is laughter and music and the clinking of champagne glasses. The next moment, there is nothing, just a hollow, ringing silence that sits in the pit of your stomach and tells you, before your brain even catches up, that something has gone irreversibly wrong. Angela heard that sound for the first time on a warm Saturday afternoon in July. She was 7 months pregnant. She was standing in her own backyard, surrounded by 40 people who loved her, holding a confetti cannon in both hands, wearing a white sundress with yellow flowers on it. She had curled her hair that morning. She had painted her nails the night before. She had cried happy tears at breakfast just thinking about what was inside that cannon. And in the next 60 seconds, everything she thought she knew about her life would be gone. Before we go any further, and I need you to stay with me on this because this story is not what you think it is, and the ending is not what anyone expected, I want you to take a breath. Because this is the kind of story that is going to make you feel something deep. It is going to make you angry. It is going to make you sad. And at the very end, it is going to make you believe, truly believe, that the universe keeps score. Angela was 34 years old when her world split in two. She had done everything right. She had been a good wife, a faithful partner, a devoted sister, and a woman who gave the people she loved every single piece of herself. And the two people she loved most in this world, her husband, Derek, and her sister, Simone, had taken every one of those pieces and quietly built something behind her back that she never saw coming. This is her story, and it starts long before the confetti ever left that cannon. Now, before we go back to the beginning, and we are going to go all the way back, I want you to hold 3 questions in your mind as you watch this. These are the 3 questions that kept Angela awake at night for weeks after everything came apart. The first one is this: how long had it really been going on? Because Derek told her one number, and the truth turned out to be something else entirely. Something so much bigger and so much older that when Angela finally heard it, she had to sit down on her kitchen floor and just breathe. The second question is this: who else knew? Because Angela was not the only person in that backyard who had a feeling that something was off. She was not the only one who had seen a look that lasted a second too long, or heard a laugh that felt slightly too familiar. Others knew things. Others had suspicions. And not one of them said a word to her. And we are going to talk about why. The third question, and this is the one that I think you will be thinking about long after this video ends, is this: what exactly happened when karma arrived? Because karma did arrive. It arrived loudly, publicly, and in a way that nobody in that backyard could have scripted if they had tried. But here is the thing about karma that people always get wrong. They think it is just about punishment. They think it is just about the guilty party getting what they deserve. But karma, in Angela's story, was about something much larger than that. It was about the universe handing a woman back her own power at the exact moment she needed it most. Now, to understand how we got to that backyard on that July afternoon, we have to go back to where everything began. And everything began, the way so many devastating stories do, with a love story that seemed, at the time, like the most beautiful thing in the world. Before we go any deeper into this story, we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Angela Marie Collins grew up in a mid-sized town in Georgia, the second of 3 daughters born to Carol and Raymond Collins. By every account, the Collins household was the kind of home that people remember warmly: Sunday dinners that lasted 3 hours, a mother who kept the front door unlocked because there was always someone stopping by, and 3 sisters who were so close that their neighbors used to joke they shared one brain between them. The oldest was Simone. Simone was 3 years older than Angela and had always been the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. Not just because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she had a confidence about her that felt almost magnetic. People were drawn to Simone. They always had been. And Angela had never once resented that, because Simone was her best friend. When Angela had her first heartbreak at 19, it was Simone who drove 3 hours to be with her. When Simone lost her first job, it was Angela who paid her rent for 2 months without being asked. They were not just sisters. They were the kind of friends that most people spend their whole lives looking for and never find. Angela had always been the steady one, the one with a plan. She graduated from college with a degree in healthcare administration, took a job at a hospital network in Atlanta, and by the time she was 27, she had her own apartment, a savings account she was proud of, and a reputation at work as the person who got things done without drama. Her younger sister, Brianna, once described her as the human equivalent of a warm cup of coffee, reliable, comforting, and always exactly what you needed. Angela laughed when she heard that. She had always believed that being dependable was not a limitation. It was a gift. She built her entire life on the idea that if you showed up consistently, if you loved people faithfully, and if you told the truth even when it was hard, the world would eventually send you something worthy of all that effort. And in the fall of 2017, it seemed like the world had finally made good on that promise. Because that was when she met Derek. Derek Anthony Mercer was 32 years old when he walked into Angela's life at a mutual friend's birthday gathering in Atlanta. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the kind of easy smile that made you feel like you were the most interesting person he had ever met. He worked in commercial real estate, drove a clean car, and was the kind of man who remembered details. What you said you were worried about 2 weeks ago, your coffee order, the name of your childhood dog. Angela's mother, Carol, would later say that she liked Derek from the very first time she met him, and that he had looked at Angela the way a man looks at someone he is terrified of losing. At the time, she meant it as a compliment. Angela had been on enough disappointing dates in her late 20s to know that what she felt with Derek was different. He did not play games. He called when he said he would call. He showed up when he said he would show up. After 6 months of dating, he told her she was the woman he had been waiting his whole life to find. She believed him. She believed him completely. And that, as she would later understand, was never the problem. The problem was that Derek was very, very good at making people believe him. They dated for a year and a half before Derek proposed. He did it on a quiet Tuesday evening, at Angela's kitchen table, with no fanfare and no grand gesture. Just a ring and a question and tears streaming down his face when she said yes. Angela would later say that the Tuesday evening proposal was one of the reasons she trusted him so completely. It felt real. It felt unperformed. They got married in the spring of 2019 in a small ceremony outside Savannah. 60 guests, string lights, and her sister Simone standing at her side as maid of honor in a pale green dress. The photographs from that day are stunning. Everyone who was there talks about how happy Angela looked. And in every single one of those photographs, just slightly to her left, is Simone, smiling, laughing, raising a glass. Looking like exactly what she was supposed to be. The best sister in the world. 2 years into their marriage, Angela found out she was pregnant. She took the test alone on a Wednesday morning, sat on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes, and then called Derek at work. He left the office in the middle of a meeting. He came home and held her for a long time without saying anything. Then he pulled back, looked at her face, and said, "We are going to be the best parents." That night, she called Simone. Simone screamed so loud Angela had to hold the phone away from her ear. It was, by every measure, a perfect moment. None of them knew yet what was already in motion. Looking back, Angela can now trace the first crack to about 8 months before the gender reveal. At the time, she did not call it a crack. She called it nothing, because that is what you do when you trust someone. You explain things away before you even have to consciously try. Derek began working later. Not every night, but often enough that it became a new pattern without her ever deciding to accept it. He traveled more for work, or at least, he said he did. He was vague about details in a way that was just subtle enough to feel like privacy rather than secrecy. He would mention a city, but not a hotel. He would say, "I've got a dinner, but not with whom." Angela told herself it was stress. His company had taken on a large portfolio that year, and she knew the workload was real. She was also 7 weeks pregnant by then, exhausted, and fighting off the kind of first trimester nausea that makes it hard to notice much beyond your own body. So she gave him the benefit of the doubt. She gave him all of her doubt, actually. She kept none of it for herself. Around the same time, Simone started pulling back. It was so gradual that Angela almost did not notice it at first. The morning text that had been a daily ritual for years started arriving less often. The Sunday dinners that Simone almost never missed suddenly had competing plans. When Angela did see her, there was something slightly off about her energy, a distracted quality, a laugh that came a half-second too late, a way of glancing at her phone that felt like she was waiting for something. When Angela asked her once, gently, if everything was all right, Simone said she was going through something personal. She said she needed a little space to work through it. Angela gave her that space. Of course she did. Because that is what you do for someone you love. You trust that when they are ready to talk, they will come to you. Angela waited, and Simone never came. Then, on a cold Thursday night in February, there was a snowstorm that had dropped 4 inches on Atlanta, which almost never happens. Derek left his phone on the kitchen counter when he went to shower. It buzzed twice in quick succession. Angela was standing right next to it. She looked at the screen. She did not pick it up. She turned it face down and walked to the other side of the kitchen and stood there with her hands pressed flat on the countertop, breathing. She has thought about that moment almost every single day since. Not with regret, exactly, but with the particular ache of a woman who chose to believe instead of look, and wonders sometimes what would have been different if she had just picked up the phone. By March, Angela was deep into planning the gender reveal. She was 7 months along, her belly full and round, and the baby, who they did not yet know was a girl, had a habit of kicking the hardest at 2 in the morning, as though already practicing the particular stubbornness that would one day define her. Angela threw herself into the planning the way she threw herself into everything, completely. She chose the venue, which was their own backyard in Decatur. She ordered the decorations, pastel lanterns, a white reveal box in the center of the yard, pink and blue ribbons threaded through the fence posts, and 200 cupcakes from a bakery she had been saving for a special occasion. She made a guest list of 40 people, close family and close friends only. And she asked Simone to handle the gender coordination, because Simone was the only person besides the doctor who was allowed to know what the results said before the party. At the time, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Simone was her person. Of course Simone would carry that secret for her. When Angela called to ask her, Simone said yes immediately. Her voice sounded strange on the phone, clipped and a little too quick, but Angela put it down to a bad connection. She confirmed the details, thanked her sister, and hung up. She did not know that she had just handed the one secret that mattered most to the one person who had already taken everything else. The week before the party, the red flags came faster. On Tuesday, Derek took a phone call during dinner that lasted 22 minutes. He stepped out onto the back porch to take it, and when he came back inside, his face was arranged very carefully into normal. He said it was his brother, Marcus. Angela did not question it at the moment. She found out 3 weeks later that Marcus had been on a cruise that entire week, a 10-day trip with his fiancée, no cell service, completely unreachable. On Thursday, Angela's friend Brenda, who had known Derek for as long as Angela had, sent her a text that said simply, "Hey, call me when you get a chance. Nothing urgent." Angela was in the middle of a work deadline and said she would call that weekend. She forgot. Brenda did not bring it up again. Angela would later learn that Brenda had seen Derek and Simone together at a restaurant in Midtown 6 weeks earlier, seated close, laughing at something on his phone, in a booth in the back corner at 9 on a Wednesday night. Brenda had convinced herself it was nothing, a family outing, a coincidence. She had driven home and told herself she would only say something if she saw something more concrete. She never did. And so the party planning continued, and the decorations went up, and the cupcakes were ordered, and 40 people marked their calendars, and nobody said a word. The morning of the gender reveal, Angela woke up at 6:30 with her daughter already kicking. The sky outside was that particular shade of pale gold that only happens in July in Georgia, when the heat has not yet arrived, but you can already feel it waiting at the edge of the morning. She lay in bed for a few minutes with her hands on her belly, talking quietly to the baby the way she had taken to doing in those last weeks of pregnancy, telling her about the day ahead, about the people who would be there, about how loved she already was before she had taken a single breath outside of Angela's body. Derek was still asleep beside her. She looked at his face for a moment, relaxed, familiar, the face of a man she had promised her life to, and felt a rush of something warm and certain. She got up and made coffee and stood at the kitchen window while the sun came up, and she thought, this is a good life. Whatever comes next, this is a good life. She held on to that feeling for as long as she could. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, it would be gone. The guests began arriving at noon. Angela's mother, Carol, had driven up from Macon the night before and had already rearranged half the decorations before anyone else was awake. which is exactly the kind of thing Carol Collins does. By 1 o'clock, the backyard was full of the sound of women laughing and children running through the grass, and the particular warm noise of a family gathering that is functioning the way a family gathering is supposed to. Derek was there, holding court near the grill, telling a story that had a group of men laughing. He looked good. He looked easy and confident and happy. Angela watched him from across the yard and thought, he is a good man. He is going to be a wonderful father. Simone arrived at 1:15, later than she had said she would. She was wearing sunglasses even though she had come inside the fence, and she hugged Angela quickly, the kind of hug that begins pulling away before it has fully arrived. Angela noticed. She filed it under Simone's been going through something. She got her a glass of lemonade. She introduced her to a coworker who had just moved to Atlanta. She tried to fold her back into the warmth of the afternoon. Simone smiled and nodded and held her cup with both hands and kept her sunglasses on. At 2 o'clock, they gathered around the reveal box. Angela and Derek stood together in the center of the yard, hands linked, the box in front of them. 40 people pressed in on all sides with their phones raised and their faces expectant and open. Carol was crying before they had even touched the box, because Carol cries at everything, and everyone loves her for it. Angela looked at Derek. He looked back at her and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. She reached for the ribbon. The confetti burst from the box in a cloud of soft pink, and the crowd erupted. It was a girl. Angela burst into tears the way you cry when something you have been hoping for quietly and privately finally becomes real. Derek pulled her into a hug and lifted her slightly off the ground and said something into her hair that she could not quite hear over the noise of 40 people celebrating. For about 90 seconds, the world was exactly what it looked like. And then Angela heard a voice cut through the celebration from the left side of the yard. It was her cousin Tanya. Tanya, who had driven all the way from Nashville. Tanya, who had had a few glasses of wine in the Georgia heat. Tanya, who had never in her life been accused of holding her tongue. And Tanya raised her glass toward the middle of the yard and said, in a voice that was just a shade too loud for the moment, "So when are the two of you going to come clean?" There was a beat. Just one. Then the sound of the celebration began to change shape. It did not stop. It just shifted, the way a room shifts when someone says something that everyone pretends not to have heard, but everyone has heard. Angela felt Derek's arms loosen around her. She pulled back and looked at his face. The smile was still there, technically, but it had stopped reaching his eyes. It had stopped reaching anywhere. She turned toward where Tanya was standing. She turned toward where Simone had been standing. Simone was already moving toward the back gate. Angela has described the next few seconds in several ways across several conversations over the months that followed. She has said it felt like standing at the edge of something very high and not yet falling, just looking down and understanding the drop. She has said it felt like a key turning in a lock she did not know existed. She has said that in some deep, wordless place that lives below thought and below logic, she already knew. She had known before Tanya said anything. She had known when Simone arrived in sunglasses. She had known on the Thursday night in February when she turned the phone face down. She had known in all the small, quiet moments when she chose not to look because looking would have meant having to see. What Tanya's 7 words did was simply take what Angela already knew somewhere in her body and bring it up into the light, where it could no longer be ignored or explained away or folded under a layer of trust and hope and love. The confetti was still falling. The pink paper hearts were drifting down around her feet. Her daughter was still a girl, and her husband was standing beside her with a face that had run out of things to say. The guests left within the hour. Carol stayed. She did not ask questions. She simply moved through the kitchen, putting food away and keeping her hands busy the way women of her generation do when the only other option is to fall apart. Angela sat on the couch in the living room. Derek sat across from her on the armchair. He had his elbows on his knees and his head slightly bowed, and he was quiet for a long time. Angela did not say anything either. There was, she would later explain, nothing to say that would matter until he decided to stop performing and start telling the truth. She waited. She was very good at waiting. She had been doing it without knowing it for months. Finally, Derek looked up at her and said 4 words. It was just Simone, as though naming the person made it smaller. As though the fact that there was only one name somehow reduced the size of what he had done. Angela asked him how long. He said 6 months. She asked him if it was over. He was quiet for 3 seconds too long. Those 3 seconds were, she said later, their own kind of answer, louder than anything he could have said with words. Simone did not come back that day. She did not call. She did not text until 11 o'clock that night, and when she did, it was a single message. I am so sorry. I love you. I do not expect you to forgive me. Angela read it 3 times. Then she put her phone face down on the nightstand, the same way she had put Derek's phone face down on the kitchen counter that night in February. And she lay in the dark with her hands on her belly and her daughter moving against her palms, and she did not cry. She has talked about that night many times, and she always mentions the not crying. Not because she was strong in that moment. She says she was not strong, not even a little, but because the feeling that had settled over her was too large and too dense for tears. It was grief. Not the sharp grief of a sudden loss, but the slow, heavy grief of understanding that something you thought was real was never fully what it appeared to be. That is a different kind of pain. That is the kind of pain that does not scream. It settles. Over the next 72 hours, Angela did what she has always done in every hard situation in her life. She gathered information. She got organized. She prepared. And what she found over those 72 hours was a truth so much larger than the one Derek had offered her on the couch that night that it would take her another 3 weeks, a confrontation at her mother's kitchen table, and Simone finally breaking completely open before she had the full picture. Angela began with the phone records. She and Derek had a shared plan, and she had full account access, something that had always felt like a symbol of their transparency with each other and now felt like a small, unexpected gift from the version of her life that had existed before July. She pulled the records for the last 8 months and sat at her kitchen table at 2 in the morning with a yellow legal pad and went through every single entry. The calls to the number she did not recognize. The texts that lasted for hours on a Tuesday afternoon when he was supposed to be in Birmingham for work. The calls that came in after midnight and lasted 4 and 5 minutes. The length of a conversation, not a voicemail. She cross-referenced dates. She pulled his email receipts. They had always shared email passwords, another symbol of a transparency that was, she now understood, entirely one-sided. She found a hotel receipt from October, a property 40 minutes from their house in Decatur. She had been in Macon visiting her parents that weekend. Simone had told her she was in Charlotte for a work conference. Same hotel, same dates, one room. She printed the receipt. She put it in a folder. She kept going. She called Brenda. Brenda told her about the restaurant in Midtown, the Wednesday night in the back corner booth, the way they had been sitting, the way they had laughed. Brenda cried through most of the call and kept saying that she should have told her, that she had almost called a dozen times, that she did not know how to say something that could ruin so much. Angela told her she was not angry with her, and she meant it, though the meaning of it was complicated in ways she could not fully explain yet. She called 2 other people who she had reason to believe might know something. One of them confirmed that Derek had been seen twice with a woman at a gym near his office, a woman who matched Simone's description. The other person said something that stopped Angela cold. She said that about 3 months before the gender reveal, Simone had pulled her aside at a gathering and made a comment. A throwaway remark that this person had filed under strange and never returned to. About how sometimes the person you are meant to be with is already in your life, already close. And it just takes the courage to stop pretending otherwise. She had not known what Simone meant. Now she did. And the picture that was assembling itself on Angela's yellow legal pad was not the 6-month affair that Derek had confessed to on the couch. It was something much older. She could feel it before she could prove it. But she was very close to proving it. 3 weeks after the gender reveal, Carol Collins called both of her daughters to her kitchen table. She did not ask. She summoned. Carol had grown up in a family where women cleaned up their own messes and did not wait for someone else to hand them a broom, and she had passed that quality to both of her daughters in different ways. She made coffee. She put a plate of food on the table that no one would eat, and she looked at Simone and said 4 words, "Tell your sister everything." What followed was 90 minutes that Angela has described as the most painful conversation of her life, and she has had many painful conversations since July, so that is not a small thing to say. Simone told her everything. She told her that the affair had not started 6 months ago. It had started at Angela's wedding, on the night of the wedding, while Angela was still in her dress. She told her that it had stopped and started several times over the 3 years since. Months of silence followed by messages that would reignite it, followed by guilt, followed by silence again. She told her that Derek had told her he was going to leave Angela, that he had said it repeatedly, that she had believed him, that she had been waiting, in her particular miserable and self-deceiving way, for him to follow through on a promise he was never going to keep. The kitchen was very quiet when Simone finished. Carol was looking out the window with her jaw set and her hands folded on the table. Angela sat with the information for a long time before she said anything. Then she said, "He started this the night we got married." It was not a question. It was the sound of a thing finally being named out loud. Here is where this story becomes something more than a story about betrayal. Here is where the universe, or God, or whatever name you give to the force that balances things out, began to do its work. While Angela was meeting with a divorce attorney, a woman named Patricia who had handled enough cases like this one to know exactly how to move through them efficiently and without sentiment, she received a message from a number she did not know. The message was brief. It said, "You don't know me, but I think we need to talk." Her name was Melissa. She was a woman Derek had met at a professional conference in Nashville 18 months earlier. She had known he was married. She had told herself it was temporary. She had believed, as Simone had believed, that Derek was in the process of leaving. He had said it to Melissa the same way he had said it to Simone, with conviction, with tears, with the particular performance of a man who had learned that vulnerability is its own kind of manipulation. Melissa had ended things in April. She had ended things because Derek had refused to leave. He had come back to her twice after that. The last time was 3 weeks before the gender reveal party. Angela held her phone in her hand and looked at this woman's name on her screen and understood, in one clarifying moment, the full architecture of what she had been living inside. Derek had not been choosing between his wife and her sister. He had not been torn between two loves. He had simply been a man who lied to every woman in his life with equal facility and expected each of them to wait patiently in the version of the story he had written for her. And here is what happened to Simone. Because this is the part that people who know this story always pause on. Simone had not simply risked her relationship with her sister. She had not simply gambled their family, their history, their bond. She had done all of that while believing Derek's promises. When the truth came out, all of it, including Melissa, Simone did not react the way you might expect. She did not defend herself. She did not argue. She sat in her apartment for a week without going to work, and when her roommate finally coaxed her out of her bedroom, she said the thing that has stayed with the people who heard it. "I burned down the only relationship in my life that I was certain about, and I did it for someone who was lying to us both." That was Simone's particular karma. Not a dramatic public moment, not a scene, not a confrontation. Just the very quiet and very devastating realization that she had traded something irreplaceable for something that had never been real. Research on infidelity consistently shows that affair relationships, built on deception and the particular false intimacy of a shared secret, rarely survive once the deception is removed. The fantasy cannot hold once the ordinary world presses in. Derek and Simone never had a relationship after the truth came out. The thing they had built in the dark had no foundation strong enough to stand in the light. Derek signed the divorce papers 4 months after their daughter was born. Patricia, the attorney, had done her work well. In the state of Georgia, documented adultery is admissible in divorce proceedings and can influence the court's decisions on issues including asset division and support. Angela kept the house. She kept her car. She kept the savings account that she had built before Derek ever came into her life. Derek left with his personal belongings and a court-mandated financial obligation and the particular diminished quality of a man who has been fully seen and found wanting. He did not fight her on anything of substance. Angela has several theories about why: shame, guilt, or perhaps a calculation that fighting would mean more exposure, more documentation, more truth on the record. Whatever his reason, she did not question it. She signed the final paperwork on a Tuesday afternoon, fitting, somehow, that the marriage had been proposed on a Tuesday and ended on one, and she drove home and made dinner and gave her daughter a bath and put her to bed and sat on her porch in the dark for a long time. Not with relief, exactly. With the particular exhausted peace of someone who has carried something very heavy for a very long time and has finally been allowed to set it down. 14 months passed. Angela and Simone did not speak during that time. Not a text, not a call, not a birthday message. Carol navigated the silence between them with the careful exhaustion of a mother who loves two children equally and can do nothing to repair what only those two children can repair themselves. Then, on a Tuesday in October, Angela notices now that Tuesdays seem to carry weight in her life. Simone appeared at the front door of the house in Decatur. She had not called ahead. She was holding a sealed envelope. She did not ask to come in. She handed Angela the envelope and said, "I know this does not fix anything. I just needed you to have it." Then she left. The envelope contained a handwritten letter for pages that Angela has chosen not to share publicly. And that is her right and her privacy, and we will honor it. What she has said about the letter is this: it was not an explanation, it was not a justification, and it did not ask for anything. It was, she said, just the truth of her sister's grief written down plainly. She read it 4 times. She put it in a drawer. She took it out again a week later. The question of forgiveness is not one Angela has fully answered, and she does not pretend otherwise. What she has said is that she and Simone have spoken since, that the conversations are short and careful and carry the weight of everything that is not being said, that she does not hate her sister, that hating requires an energy she has decided to spend on other things, specifically on the daughter who needs a mother fully present in her life, not one consumed by the long and exhausting work of holding a grudge. Angela's daughter turned 2 years old this past spring. Her name is Nyla. She has her father's height, her grandmother Carol's laugh, and her mother's eyes, which is, Angela says, the part she loves most. They live in the house in Decatur, which Angela has repainted and replanted and made entirely her own, room by room, over the past 2 years. She has a porch where she drinks her coffee in the mornings before Nyla wakes up, and she says that 20 minutes of quiet on that porch is the best part of her day. She is not remarried. She is not in a rush. She has said, and she says it clearly, without performance, in the matter-of-fact way of a woman who has genuinely arrived at something true, that she is happier now than she was in the life she thought was perfect. Not because hardship is good, but because the life on the other side of hardship belongs entirely to her. No performance, no management, no quiet anxiety that she cannot name because she does not yet understand its source. Just her daughter, and her house, and her coffee, and a morning that starts exactly the way she chooses it to start. The researchers and psychologists who study betrayal and recovery consistently find that the women who come through it most completely are the ones who redirect their energy from the people who hurt them toward the life they want to build. Angela did not know that research. She just did it instinctively, which, if you have been listening to this story, probably does not surprise you at all. Here is what Angela's story is really about, underneath all of it. It is not about a cheating husband. It is not even about a betraying sister. It is about trust, what it costs us to give it completely, what it reveals about us when it is broken, and what it takes to build something real and lasting from the wreckage of a trust that was not honored. There is a statistic worth knowing here. Research from the Journal of Marriage and Family shows that over 50% of people who experience major betrayal in a close relationship report, in the years that follow, that the experience ultimately clarified something for them, about themselves, about what they were willing to accept, about what they were truly capable of surviving. Half of people, in the long run, say the worst thing that happened to them also showed them something essential about who they are. Angela is in that half. She will tell you so herself. But the question I want to leave you with, the question I think you will be turning over tonight, maybe tomorrow, maybe longer, is not about Angela. It is about you. How many of us are living inside a life right now that we have never fully examined? How many of us have turned a phone face down on a kitchen counter and walked to the other side of the room and chosen not to look, because looking might mean having to act on what we see? And if the confetti fell, and the smoke cleared, and the truth came out, what would you find? And more importantly, would you be strong enough to build something better from what remained? Angela was. She did not know it before July. She found out in the hard way, the only way that particular kind of strength can be found, by needing it before you have it, and discovering it waiting for you there. That is her story. And it is, I think, a story worth knowing. We will see you in the next one.